Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my reaction series of Attack on Titan's final season. Similar to last week, I am not going to have much to say for this preamble. This is some story material that I've been waiting to be adapted for forever, it seems like. And as excited as I was for last week's material to be adapted, this week's has it beat by just a little bit. I've been waiting for this to be adapted for what seems like forever. It is arguably my favorite material in the story. It's definitely right up there. So I just can't wait to see how they adapt this. And yeah, I am. Oh boy. Just a reminder that if you want to watch my reaction to the next episode or the next two episodes, those will be available on Patreon at the date that this is released on YouTube, for anyone who's interested in a little bit of something extra. Once again, every Monday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, we do a discussion on my Twitch channel about the latest Attack on Titan episode from the day before. So if you're interested in joining us for that, feel free, and we'd be glad to have you in. That's all I gotta say. Let's just get right into it. Sound design already really good.
いかにも幸せそうじゃないか。仲間や以前の家族を地獄に突き落として一体何がしたい？お前がわかるまで見せてやる。グリシャ・イエーガーがいかにして息子を洗脳し、わかるまで何度も。
As much as it takes, his commitment to this is unyielding, Zeke's.
よかったな、グリシャ。ここじゃ一回目の家族を一切忘れて幸せを享受するあんたを。
As well as his resentment to his father, understandably.
以前も息子がいたことを一切忘れてもな。
How painful must it be for Zeke to watch this scene? Chasing after those wings since he was a toddler.
これが奴の正体だ。医者の肩書きを利用して権力者にすり寄り出したぞ。壁の王を追求し、なぜだかわかるか。このクソ親父はエルディア復権のためなら妻子をクソダメに捨てるようなクソ野郎だからだ。洗脳が解けたよ。時間は無限にある。焦らなくていい。
The pettiness. Hannes. Kenny.
まさかこんなに早く突き止めていたなんて。壁の王の目白だ。壁が破壊された日のはず。まだ何年も先だ。
He knew about it all this time. Wow. Maybe he did love his second son.
なるほど。二人目の息子は愛されていたらしい。さすがに前回の失敗を踏まえているようだ。本来のお前ではなくなった。
Not quite as forgotten as you think.
ごめんな。ごめんな。ジーク。ジーク。そこにいるのか。バカか。ジークがあんなひげ面おじさんなわけないだ。
They've done something to the voice to make it ever so slightly echoey and distant. It's beautifully done.
次の記憶だ。ジーク。
Wow. Already, some really nice things they're doing with sound design. Like I mentioned, there's a ever so slight echo and bit of a texture on the voice for Grisha as he's speaking in these memories that they're exploring, just to show that he's distant. This is a distant memory. This is the distant past. It's unreachable. It isn't on the same plane as Eren and Zeke. I don't know, it's a very subtle effect, but it's definitely palpable at the same time, what they've done to his voice there. So I really like that. And starting off with the baby coos from baby Eren, I think that was a really good choice for easing us into the episode in a very intimate way, because this is an intimate thing they're doing right now. a very personal, a very emotional thing.
お前はもう9歳になるな。グリシャはお前を愛し、自由に育てた。だとしたら、なぜお前は俺を裏切った、エレン。なぜ争いを終わらせることを拒む。
Oh, oh, what a great.
生まれた時から俺のままだ。
Chills.
俺とあんたが同じだと思ってたようだが、間違っている。他人から自由を奪われるくらいなら、
Steal theirs
俺はそいつから自由
first.
を奪う。俺は生まれた時からこうだった。生まれた時から。あんたが望んだ哀れな弟はどこにもいない。あんたの心の傷を分かち合う都合のいい弟も。ただここにいるのは、父親の望んだエルディア復権を否定し続けることでしか自分自身を肯定できない男。エレン。
That echo
始祖
again.
の世界を救う前に、たった一人のお前を救いたいんだ。
Parallel to Zeke and seeing kids playing with their father as when he was young, what he's always wanted himself. Wow. The light piano.
なんだよ。耳が赤かった。嘘ついた証拠。ミカサに手伝ってもらったのね。
Wow. I'm pretty sure this is shot for shot, almost exactly the scene from episode 1, with Aaron and Zeke inserted into the background. And seeing it is very emotional.
エレンが調査兵団に入りたいって。
ミカサ、言うなって。エレン、何を考えているの？
エレン、どうして外に出たいんだ？
It all comes back to the same thing. It's who he
知り
is.
たいんだ。外の世界がどうなっているのか。何も知らずに一生壁の中で過ごすなんて嫌だ。ここで誰も続く人がいなかったら、今までに死んだ人たちの命が無駄になる。
The tone of the music is absolutely spot on.
エレン、帰ったらずっと秘密にしていた地下室を見せてやろう。
本当に？
Ah, the recontextualization. Who could have known this whole time? Absolutely terrified. Oh, what a shot. Oh, beautiful shot.
私は壁の外から来たエルディア人。あなた方と同じユミルの民です。壁の王よ、今すぐ壁に攻めてきた巨人を殺してください。妻や子供たちが、壁の民が食われてしまう前に。
The vow.
罪から逃れてはいけません。我々ユミルの民が裁かれる日が来たのです。再び始祖の力が弱き者の手に落ちるの。
Zeke's face.
世界は地獄と化す。世界を守るためには我々は罪を受け入れ、滅びゆくほかないのです。
The vow to renounce war. Sins of the father.
この一家はここでグリシャによって皆殺しにされる。
Oh, goosebumps
お前はかつて
constantly.
この記憶を見たと言ったな。あれも嘘だったの。
私の家は
Oh
破
my
壊さ
god.
れた壁のすぐそばにありと暮らしている。この壁に住む人々は誰も先祖
God,
の
what an
犯
image.
した罪など知らない。ただ訳も分からず巨人に食われることが贖罪だというのか。
The voice acting.
我々はただ何も知らずに世界の怒りを受け入れれば、死ぬのは我々エルディア人だけで済むのです。
Oh my god.
かねてより進撃の巨人の継承者は何者にも従うことがなかった。すべては王の独善に抗うため。そう、この時のために皆がこの記憶に導かれた。進撃の巨人は
But the hesitation.
未来を知ることが可能なのだ。
どういうことだ。 エレン。
進撃の巨人の特性。
That rumbling sound effect?
そんな話を。
私はここで始祖を食らい王家の血をここで絶やす決まっている。できない。私に子供を殺すことなど。私は命を救う医者だ。
バカな。グリシャは確かに始祖を奪い、この一家を虐殺した。
I have goosebumps.
ない。
And she hesitates.
何をしてる？立てよ父さん。忘れたのか？何をしにここに来たのか。復権派の仲間に、ダイナに、クルーガーに報いるために進み続けるんだ。死んでも死んだ後も。これは父さんが始めた物語だろう。
I can't handle this. And then Aaron's face tells a story of its own.
小さな子も潰した。カマテル。
Oh my god.
レイスケを殺したぞ。父親以外はこれでいいのか。これでよかったのか。エルディアはこれで本当に救われるのか。
The voice acting is too much for me.
なぜ全てを見せてくれないんだ。本当にこれしか道はなかったのか。そこにいるんだろう。ジーク。この先お前の望みは叶わない。叶うのはエレンの望みだ。先の記憶を見た。しかしまさかあんな恐ろしいことになるとは。ジーク、お前なのか。大きくなったな。すまない。私はひどい父親だった。
The tone of the music, again.
辛い思いをさせる。
This isn't a triumphant or happy reunion or confession because of the circumstance. But nonetheless, the meaning's still there. All he's wanted from the beginning. Holy shit. Unbelievable. Unbelievable how they did that. Again, I'm sorry I didn't talk too much, I guess. That was completely overwhelming. I felt like I was on the verge of tears throughout the entire thing. There was so much to talk about, things in terms of presentation, but story as well. Just a quick little summary is that I don't think that it was completely perfect. There were a couple of things that I do think could have been done a tiny bit better as an adaptation, which I'll talk about in a bit, but the positives so far outweighed the negatives that I really don't care. I really don't care at all. Like I said, I was on the verge of tears the entire thing, basically. From when we saw Kid Aaron and the way he's been since the beginning, to all the way at the end with Grisha, the phenomenal voice acting. If there's one thing that I had to say this episode nailed, it would be the audio direction. and I'll talk about that during the discussion. But as it stands, definitely one of my favorite in the series. These are, I think I've pretty much well established that these are chapters that I've been waiting to be adapted forever. So just seeing it come to fruition and seeing it done in a way that I think is full of quality is very overwhelming for me. And so that's why I guess I spent a lot of it just kind of taking it in, taking it in. I'm not saying a ton, but hopefully the reaction was palatable enough for you. I'm not going to alter it to try and be more entertaining. I've said this from the beginning. I'm just going to react to it in a natural way I would react to it, with a bit more verbiage, verbalizing things more. But aside from that, what you see is what you get, and that was my natural reaction to this. Very full of emotion, and yeah, it was a lot for me. That aside, just to start off really simple, this episode in terms of the adaptation, the chapters it adapted, it finished chapter 120, which is where we left off at the end of the last episode, and did the vast majority of chapter 121. So it did about a chapter, maybe a little bit more than a chapter, which is on par with the first two episodes from the final season part 2. However, I think the pacing was much better and more dynamic than in Then, where you could tell things were being padded out a bit more, because those were action-centric episodes, or at least there was a lot of action in them, whereas this was very dialogue-based. There was lots of dialogue, lots of talking, and yet they covered a very dialogue-heavy chapter, a full one, with a pretty taut pace, I think. I think it was quite focused and quite well done. Whereas with the first two, while I didn't have huge problems with them or anything, as you guys know, you could tell that they were kind of padding things out a little bit to end the episodes at certain points, and get to certain points at certain times, so that, like I said, all hell could break loose in the last episode. But yeah, so I think the pacing and what was adapted was all done really well. It flowed well, I think, and yeah, I was a fan. I think the dialogue was dwelt upon enough, but it wasn't, overly ponderous or anything like that. It was as snappy as it needed to be while putting enough weight on all of the right moments. Now, I did mention that it wasn't a perfect episode. I did have some problems here and there with it. They're very minor because I'm going to be gushing for a lot of things when it comes to this episode, so I just want to get them out of the way really quickly. Isayama, I think one of his greatest strengths as an artist, in terms of his art, is portraying character emotions through expressions. There are lots of facial expressions through the manga that tell you so much with just a picture, just a glance, a look in a character's eyes, etc. And these chapters are very, very deep into that. They fixate very much on these very subtle gestures and subtle facial expressions. And so I think here and there was a facial expression that wasn't quite as nuanced as it was in the manga, and so I think may not have gotten the full spirit of how they were intended to come across in the manga in the anime. But that's honestly much more of a lack of a positive than it is a genuine negative, in my opinion, because like I said, these illustrations are so good from Isayama. He has his critics as an artist. I'm not going to say he's as good as Miura or someone like that. But as the manga goes on and as we get to this material, in my opinion, the art becomes pretty spectacular, and a lot of it is portrayed through these very human facial expressions. And some of them just aren't quite captured as well as I'd hoped in the anime. This season has done a great job so far of capturing them. There were a couple that I think could have been done a bit better. Another thing is the character models were not quite as sharp and consistent as they were in previous episodes, I think. Eren and Zeke, here and there you'd look at them and things would be not as clean, not as on point. Proportions would look a bit off here and there. Nothing huge again, but it was more rough around the edges than the first 3 episodes in my opinion. And I did notice it, so I just thought I'd mention it. So how do we start talking about this episode? I've got quite a bit of a task ahead of me for this discussion and for the discussion on stream tomorrow morning, but I'll try my best to keep things focused. Like always, I'm going to start off with the overall presentation, and I want to start with the audio direction. Like I mentioned, this episode was extremely overwhelming for me, and I think a big reason why is because of the audio presentation. I think they absolutely knocked it out of the park here. I think that basically every decision made in terms of voice direction, how lines were voice acted, Again, that echo in the first half of the episode for the dialogue for the memories, how music sort of ramped up and then faded, and when they were inserted and when they stopped, and how things transitioned into one another, and the little integrative sound effects as well. Everything to do with the audio direction here was absolutely spot on, near perfect as far as I can tell, and it accentuated this stuff, this material, this story segment to the nth degree. It was absolutely beautifully done. And I'll get into the specifics in a bit, but if I had to describe it, I'd just say that the audio direction knew exactly what feelings to convey and how to convey them. So for instance, towards the end of the episode, we have just Grisha basically prostrating himself in front of Zeke and saying, "Forgive me, I was not a father to you. I'm so sorry for everything I've done. I love you." The line that Zeke has been waiting for forever, his entire life, the words he's been waiting to hear. "I love you," and he says that. And that is a very, very impactful, very emotional moment for Zeke in particular, because it's everything that his life has been leading up to, everything he's really wanted, everything that defined him and defined his path. And if Grisha had just played ball with him as a kid, if he hadn't been doing all these things with him, indoctrinating him with the ideologies that took root in his mind after losing Faye, Zeke would have turned out much different. So this defines Zeke, his relationship, his dynamic with Grisha, how he sees him as a person. And so that's why this scene is so huge, because it's everything he's ever waited for, everything he's ever wanted. But they refrain from making it a gentle piano track. They refrain from making it quiet and emotional and uplifting or sweeping in a very, yes, this is what we've been waiting for way. Instead, the song is deeply emotional, but the tone of it is very overpowering, overwhelming, and disturbing. Some notes of it are almost horrifying and deeply lamenting how things have come to be this way, deeply sorrowful, because in this moment, it is a moment of salvation for Zeke, of everything his life has been leading to, but it's also a moment of too little too late, Grisha. After what this has come to, yes, it's great that he's hearing these things and he's receptive to it, but I feel like the song itself is also lamenting that things have come to be this way. It is a deeply sorrowful song, and whereas some directors, the people behind the production of this episode may have thought, let's make this a bit quieter, let's make this a gentle piano track as these two reconcile. That is not the energy of this scene. The energy of this scene is that, yes, it's wonderful for Zeke, it's deeply emotional, it's very, very meaningful for Grisha to finally say these things and have the opportunity to say these things. But the situation is so messed up and twisted that it can't be anything close to redeeming or anything other than deeply lamentable. And the music captured that tone beautifully. Just one example. So I'm going to get back to this scene that I just mentioned, but not dwell on it as much because I just explained it. But throughout, there are bits of audio direction and music placement that is just done so well and has such an understanding of the source material and the tone of these moments. So yeah, the audio direction was phenomenal. There's a constant tone of tragedy, of like a heavy, deep-rooted tragedy throughout the entire thing as we go through these memories, go through memory lane and see these things that have happened. And it's very nostalgic, but at the same time very sorrowful because we know how a lot of these events turn out and it is nothing good. And we see just seeing a childhood Eren, knowing what this innocent young boy is about to experience in his life, how much he's going to lose, how much he's going to be disturbed by these things and be warped by these things. I got emotional just seeing a child Eren, and I think that's why, just knowing what it leads to, but also seeing these things, it's just overwhelming. It's just overwhelming seeing it all come full circle. Seeing Armin, Mikasa, Eren, Carla alive and well. Grisha with this new context. Hannes, Kenny. Just seeing all these characters again in this context. This chapter being adapted was just very emotional for me, and it was hard for me to not get swept up in it. And then one more thing about the audio. I mentioned the voice acting, but I would be amiss if I didn't single out Grisha's voice actor. The name of Grisha's voice actor is Hiroshi Tsushita. Every episode, he has been phenomenal, especially in these huge moments of desperation. I remember tearing up when I first saw the episode, Season 3, Episode 7, I believe it was, that day, and he just screams, and he screams for his comrades. Pure, genuine, honest, raw desperation in these screams and this voice acting. Again, same thing in the Zeke episode 4x15, where he's yelling at Dinah. And then again here, this might be his best performance yet, and that is saying a lot. Him yelling towards Frida, the Rice family, begging them. Him screaming in desperation at Eren, like, are you happy now after what I've done? Him just saying out loud, I crushed these innocent children. I'm a doctor. It was just so visceral and raw. I could not... His voice is ringing in my head. It was just a fantastic performance. So I just really wanted to draw attention to that. But now just to touch visually on what they did. Something that Season 4 has done on occasion is do, in moments of distress and intensity, lots of quick cuts, interlacing different elements. So a great example of this would be Season 4, Episode 4, where Eren sees his grandfather in the hospital, in the mental facility of sorts, where the twist here is that he is a patient and not a doctor, and he starts spiraling as Eren mentions his guilt and the reason he's here in the first place, and he is just so disturbed, and it zooms in on his eyes and harsh, shallow breaths, and it zooms in on his eyes, and we see splices of him being a happy father, we see a red background of him and his family. We see a bit of Faye, I think, of his daughter. And these are all interlaced and intercut very swiftly. They happen very swiftly, and it always goes back to the shot of his eye as he's, again, shallowly breathing. The direction for this final season has done that a couple of times. They like to do these quick cuts in moments of huge distress or intensity. And they did that again here. They did it when Eren was talking to Grisha, and he said, stand up, you started this story, didn't you? As it flashed back through Kruger, Faye, him and Faye holding hands, all of that, and we would get quick cuts of Eren's mouth as he's voicing these things, Eren's eye, Grisha. It would just interlace all these quick cuts in, again, this moment of huge distress and anxiety for Grisha, and just huge boiling tension. I'm going to get into the scene, but using silence for that moment as this sort of ambient boiling point sort of sound effect was going on in the background, subtle but there, was a stroke of genius, I think, as it interlaced all these things. So that technique was done really well. They did it a little bit in a scene where we cut in memory lane to Eren after he had attacked Mikasa's attackers. We get a caw from a bird as it takes off, and then it cuts to Eren quickly. A bit of a different idea, but sort of similar, if you get what I mean. We also get quick cuts as Grisha's yelling in pure agony outside after he does the deed. We get very fluid and distressed and entropic, uneven character acting from Grisha as he is just so upset at what he's done that he can't even properly function in his own body. And he's like, his hands are all over his face. He's screaming. There's blurred effects going everywhere. He'd sort of stumble one direction, a close-up on his face, it would blur, he'd go the other direction. It was really well done. So those sorts of techniques really go a long way, those little visual touches, in elevating these scenes of high distress. And so in terms of the mechanics of what happened in this episode, because a lot happens in terms of what's going on with the logistics of the Attack Titan's power, how Grisha is able to see these things and know these things are happening, how he can sense these things, sense Eren, sense Zeke. There are Twitter posts all over the place that explain these things. I'm sure Reddit posts as well. You can look those up if you'd like an in-depth explanation. But to just sort of sum things up for the purpose of this discussion, what it boils down to is that the Attack Titan, anyone who has had the Attack Titan, can see the memories of others who have had that Attack Titan. So Eren has gone into the past and seen Frida. He's experienced the same things that Kruger has experienced. He's seen things from the point of view of Grisha. All three of them. Kruger has specifically experienced something from Eren when he said to Grisha at the end of Season 3, Episode 8 or 9? I think it was 9. As he says at the end of Episode 9, that Grisha has to save Mikasa and Armin. Those are clearly memories from Eren coming back to him. So the memories of the Attack Titan can be experienced anywhere from from future to past by any of its users. There are no boundaries for this sort of thing. And throughout the story, different Attack Titan users have been experiencing different memories from anywhere across the time span any of these users, whether it be future, whether it be past. So what is happening here is that in these moments, Grisha is seeing through Eren's perspective due to them both having the Attack Titan. So what is happening when Grisha sees Zeke? You'll notice that every time Grisha sees Zeke, Eren is behind him, so they are more or less from the same plane of view. He is seeing through Eren's eyes Zeke. Grisha's right here, Eren's behind him, he's seeing through Eren's eyes right ahead of him to see Zeke. And so it's very close to his perspective, very close to what he's seeing, but from Eren's eyes, because he can experience what Eren is seeing through the Attack Titan's power. So when he looks at Eren, he is not looking because he sees Eren. He is looking at the spot that he is seeing himself from through Eren's eyes, if you follow me. In the doorway, when he's looking directly at Eren with anxiety, he's looking there because he sees himself. He does not physically see Eren. He doesn't know what Eren looks like because every time he does it, he's seeing through Eren's eyes. He's just looking at the spot that he knows Eren is looking at him through because he can see himself. Make sense? I hope so. The end result is that he knows that Eren is here. He knows that he knows where Zeke is. He can see Zeke. And he can more or less understand what's going on in the moments where it comes to him. He first sees Zeke and he thinks it's an illusion, but as these memories go on, as they go through chronologically, he begins to understand what's going on, and that continues. So hopefully, if anyone was confused about that, that clears it up a little bit. It's a very underbaked summary. Like I said, there are more extensive explanations, but for the purposes of this, I think that does the job, hopefully. So we have talked about specific scenes already, but I think with all that groundwork laid, we can finally get into the episode chronologically and talking about the events and the characters and all of that. So now getting into the actual content of the episode chronologically, we start very quietly with a bird circling Shiganshina, far before any of the destruction that we've seen in the story up until now in this final arc, or in this final battle rather, has happened. A quieter Shiganshina, again these birds being ever-present, a reminder of what our characters, and particularly Eren, can never have despite his deepest wants. And we sort of ease in with these, like I mentioned, these cooing sounds from baby Eren, a very intimate way to start, seeing him from his roots. This episode is, in some ways, an encapsulation of Eren, and it's only appropriate that it starts directly with him, directly with the symbol of what he aspires to achieve, this freedom, him as a baby, and it ends with that unbelievably terrifying glare at Zeke at the end. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. Point is, it was a nice way to ease us into the episode and the context of what's going on as we go through these memories. And again, just a reminder, Zeke is going through these memories in the hopes of showing Eren how he's been indoctrinated his entire life, because that's what he believes has happened. He believes that Eren disagrees with his ideology and is so gung-ho for what Grisha stood for, because Grisha drilled it into him like he drilled it into Zeke, which then led to Zeke having changed his mind because of Ksaver. And all of that. So what he's essentially trying to do through showing Eren these things is show him what happened to him and then try to undo it through this supposed indoctrination being shown to him in front of his eyes. And then, like he says, I will not abandon you. He and Eren will, side by side, carry out this plan once Eren is on the same page as him. That is his ideal outcome for this, because he does not even think for a second that Eren was not indoctrinated. Why else would he think this way, right? Little does he know. Anyways, he makes a note. Grisha sure looks happy with his new family, his lovely new wife, his newborn son. He looks like he's having the time of his life, and you can sense the resentment in his words as he says those things, as he sadly looks on at this scene of a life he really never had. He was never given this sort of childhood. He was never able to just throw the ball around with a dad that loved him and didn't have ulterior motives and showed that love. So it is just such a sad little scene for Zeke, because right in front of his face, he's being shown the life that he never was given. He sure looks happy, enjoying this time with his new son, not even thinking about the son he abandoned. But he doesn't quite clock that Grisha didn't indoctrinate Eren at this point, right in the beginning. It takes a bit more for him to realize and come to see that, you know what, he did learn from his mistakes. That'll come later. But as for this scene, just very sad for Zeke to see this. and it was lovely to see Carla again. Then time moves on. We have a baby Eren who is now able to walk, a toddler Eren, chasing after a butterfly. Wings again, wings of freedom. He goes up to Grisha, another heartwarming scene right in front of Zeke's eyes as they look on. And then this continues as we see Zeke, who is now, as we see Grisha, who has now become a doctor, treating people. And Zeke says, look, this is who your father is. Ironically, this is who he is, this doctor person now. But what Zeke says is, this is who our father is. This is who he was. He became a doctor to get close to those in power and then get access to the king and information about the king and hunt them down and steal the founding titan. And so he frames it this way and says, look, this is who our father is, not knowing that he's being truthful about this, because Grisha Yeager at this point had developed into a bona fide, honest-to-goodness doctor, someone who cared for people who actually wanted to save lives, who didn't really have these ulterior motives anymore, as we'll get into in a bit. He had the dregs of his former motivations, of the duty he was going to carry out for Kruger, embedded in his mind, and they were always there. But by this point, he had become someone different. He was still Grisha Yeager, of course. He's not a totally distinct entity. But there's a very key difference in motivation and psychology and ideals and philosophy between freedom fighter, revolutionist, restorationist Grisha Yeager and the Grisha Yeager that took root in Paradis and married Carla and had Eren, as we'll see as we discuss Grisha a bit later. But I find it neat irony in this scene as he points out, look, this is who this really is. You're right, Zeke, this is who he is at this point, just not in the way you are trying to portray him. And then he goes on to explain, if he slips up in this endeavor, his family would suffer. But do you know why he continued on? And he's going to say something along the lines of, he's reckless, he's selfish, this dream has taken hold of him and he doesn't care who gets left behind in its wake, etc., all the things that he's embedded into his mind and learned about Grisha through his life. That's what the answer to this question is. And Eren, in a very petty, almost childish way, says, yeah, because he's an asshole who would toss his family into a dish to restore Eldia. I get it now. I was wrong. I am no longer brainwashed. Can we go now? I find that very funny. It was a very funny little moment, little petty moment to show that Eren, while he has seemingly steeled himself, while he is cold in many ways, he does still have that childish, impetuous side to him, and it comes out in this moment. And Zeke's response to what is quite a jab by Eren is to just say, no worries, we've got all the time in the world for me to show you the truth. It's very emotional to me. Up until the end, no matter what Eren says to him, no matter how many times he dismisses what Zeke is trying to tell him, how many times Eren says, flat out rejects these things, Zeke is utterly committed to showing him that what is in his eyes the truth, and to lifting the veil from Eren, for letting him see what the truth of the world is and becoming true kindred spirits with him. I think that's born out of a mix of a misinterpretation of who Eren is, as we'll see in a second, that resulted into a very genuine love. And in addition to that, it's attached to the lack of belonging he's felt his entire life. Ksaver gave it to him, but aside from that, he's wanted a father, he's wanted a family, he's never been granted that. And so Eren represents that in this point in time. Eren's all he has. And so his love for Eren is a mix of this misinterpretation and sympathy for him having supposedly experienced the same things he did and feeling bad for him because of that and his indoctrination, which we know isn't the truth, as well as the specific emotional context and loneliness of Zeke that then sort of converged to form this love. And so I think this is all done, again, out of this love, out of this care that took root as a result of loneliness and desolation and being brought up in this horrible, horrible situation and misinterpretation as a result of that situation. A misinterpretation and him unwilling to or unable to see the possibility that Eren was maybe just raised with love. Maybe their father wasn't so bad to Eren specifically. Anyways, we flash through these little scenes. Lovely to see Hannes again. Lovely to see Kenny again. Grisha treating people, Grisha playing with his family. Some nice expressions throughout of Zeke looking very wistfully, melancholically at these scenes. Again, there's these shots of the things that he was never granted as a child throughout his childhood. And you can see the longing in his eyes. You can see the longing in his body language as he looks on at these scenes. It is extremely sad, and this episode continuously nails home Zeke's need for affection. As Eren looks on throughout all these scenes, his expression is very unreadable in a lot of them. He just kind of looks on, and you can interpret his expression in numerous ways. You could see it as slightly sad in some ways, or nonplussed, or just uncaring. It's a very unreadable expression through these specific little scenes, this little montage I'm referring to. Perhaps even a disinterest. And then we learn that Grisha knew about the hideout for the Rice family, the location underneath the church, or the chapel, where the King of the Wall would hide out. So we now know that Grisha knew about this long ago, which is quite a bit of a shocker to Zeke, which means that Grisha knew about this. He didn't first find this place the day that the wall fell. He knew about it all this time for years and never acted on anything, never did anything, and went back to Eren and hugged him for dear life. And this is where it clicks for Zeke. There's a lovely scene of Grisha looking on horrified as he finds this hideout, and Zeke looking at Grisha horrified at this discovery, because what it represents is that as the scene progresses, it looks like he did love you. He did love you. He loved you in a way he never loved me. He embraced you in a way he never embraced me. And how hard must it be to come to terms with that? There must have been a sort of vicarious comfort, or a kindred comfort, in him thinking that Eren was never loved in the same way he was never loved. He might have been able to find some quelling of loneliness because he saw that in Eren, and because he felt true empathy because of that, since he could relate to it. But in learning that Eren was loved, in learning that Grisha treated him as a proper son, was a good father to Eren, in the way he wasn't to Zeke, there goes his relatability with Eren. There goes the hopes that Eren would be able to understand his situation. And here comes the loneliness. He is once again the only person in the world who has experienced this, and it must be such a desolate, empty feeling to once again, after feeling this relief, this connection to Eren, someone who he thinks has experienced all the same things he did, having that taken away and learning once again, yes, you are the only one who ever experienced any of this. All the things you've learned, all the things you've come to know about life are specific to you. You are the only one. You are the only one who's experienced this. And he accepts it. He goes, I guess he learned from his mistakes. I guess it's only me. And there is just, your heart really goes out to him. Zeke has done tons of terrible things, but God, is he a sympathetic character. And just the look in his eyes as he thinks about the contrast in how Grisha would look upon him, and how, with disappointment and disinterest and ulterior motives, and how he now looks at Eren with pure love, pure worry for his well-being. A worry he never had, a concern he never had for Zeke. It's beyond words what he must be feeling in that moment. However, he says, Eren, you're a stark contrast from me because he cared for you. And the implication here, I think, from Zeke is that Grisha just stopped thinking about him. He found his new beautiful family, he loved them, he learned from his past mistakes, but he never dwelt on his past mistakes. He never dwelt on Zeke and his former family, his first family. But that is not the truth, because we see him in the basement, I think this is the basement, sleeping. Underneath his arm, the photo of him, Dinah, and Zeke, and moaning in his sleep that he's sorry, the regret he feels, showing that he never once stopped thinking about Zeke. He lived this life, he loved this life with his new family, and he did learn from his mistakes, but he never forgot those mistakes. And he is so remorseful for what he did, so much so that he has nightmares about it. Nightmares about his regrets and all of that. And once again, Grisha, just like Zeke, a severely flawed human being, but knowing where he comes from, why he came to think the way he did, why he was so determined to do these things, why he indoctrinated his kid, with it not being justifiable in any sense. What he did was heinous and evil, what he did to Zeke. To do that to a kid, to put all that on his shoulders, and then to not love him, that is inhumane what he did. It is awful. But the crux of it was born in this insatiable yearning for a life he was never granted, for a freedom that he thinks people deserve, that him and his people deserve, that they've never been able to grasp for themselves. And just this desire that echoes throughout the series for more, and that more not being something beyond that should be beyond anyone's station. He just wanted to see the airship. Eren just wanted to see beyond the walls. Armin just wanted to see the wonders beyond the walls. Eren just wanted to look at the sea and not see more conflict and death beyond it. Zeke just wanted a world without pain. And so this yearning for something that should be a God-given right, something that everyone deserves and should have, that was not granted to these people, is the crux of so much of their motivations. So it's very understandable from Grisha, and it's sympathetic, and you can feel sympathy for him while at the same time deeply, deeply criticizing the way he went about this. What he did was horrible. But because of why he did that in the first place, and because of us knowing where his heart really was, for me at least, it is deeply emotional to see him dreaming about Zeke and being so regretful and remorseful about him. And for the first time, he sees Zeke, and like only a parent could, recognizes him decades later, aged decades and decades. And then he kind of shakes himself out of it. But I think it's very touching that he instantly thought of Zeke and recognized him in this moment, as only a caring parent could. He did care for Zeke. He just never showed it. He was never able to not be a terrible parent because his ambitions overwhelmed his desire to be a proper parent, sadly. It's such a complex dynamic there. So many, complex morally. So many different ways to feel about different facets of these characters and their relationships with one another and how they go about their goals. It's just so much food for thought. I could talk about it for forever, but I'll move on. Zeke then says, I guess you weren't indoctrinated, as it clicks for him. So you moved this way, you went along this trajectory in the way Father would have wanted on your own. Interesting. Like he didn't think this was a possibility before. And what's notable is that Zeke talks about a clear distinction between the original Eren and the Eren that there is now. Something happened. Something made him think this way. Because it's not possible for him to have wanted to do these things from the start, right? That is not possible in Zeke's eyes. So while something has clicked, he's not been indoctrinated by his father, something has happened. The original you is gone. And that's what he says to Eren. And as we know about Eren, he does not agree with that whatsoever, and he is correct in not agreeing. And this is where Eren takes the lead a little bit now. And he says, next memory, Zeke, next stop. We have the OP, and then we have a scene with a very cute Armin and Eren as kids. They're just absolutely precious. We see them waving to Grisha. Zeke again acknowledges that Grisha did love him, and once again acknowledges that he was not brainwashed, he was not indoctrinated. And he kind of wonders, what could have happened. As Eren says, it was pointless to go through these memories, you're not going to find any of that. And so Zeke says, why did you betray me? And then we get a scene that defines Eren. There are very few sentences throughout any stories that I've ever read or experienced in general or watched that can define a character or define a base characteristic of a character in a very concise way. But this scene does for Eren, in my opinion. Zeke says, why did you do this? What were you planning to do with the Founder's power? What is the deal? What is your deal? What are you aiming to do? Why are you like this? And we get a beautiful shot of Eren's eyes. Again, Attack on Titan eye shots. I know, it's cliche, but you have to draw attention to it. It was a beautiful shot, and in the expression on Eren's eyes, there's that softness that I was talking about that is lacking in some of the expressions, but there is so much softness and nuance here. He is tired, he is sentimental. In his eyes, I think you can see. You can see all the weight of everything he's been shouldering, all the pain and agony he's experiencing internally, and just the exhaustion. And my heart goes out to him seeing this image, because it really gets across his mental state that he doesn't let anyone else see, but that he clearly is feeling on some level. It's a mix of sentimentality and a mix of exhaustion, but his eyes are very clear. As he says, I am who I've always been from the moment I was born. It's said slightly different in the manga, where I think he says, I am me, I always have been, something along those lines. The sentiment is the same. Eren, since he was born, since before he learned anything about the true nature of the world beyond the walls, beyond the Titans, before he learned any of that truth, Grisha never indoctrinated him with any ideology or anything. Since he was born, he has been monstrous. Eren acknowledges that. He knows this. He knows these things. There is an element of this to the OP and the ED that we discussed in the episode 1 of the final season part 2 discussion that we talked about then. Eren is aware of this monstrous side of him, this side of him that yearns for this freedom and that will do anything it takes to get that. As he says here, as we get a flash, the bird, again, the bird cawing, taking off, very indicative, very symbolic of Eren's ambitions, as we see the aftermath of when he killed Mikasa's attackers or captors. Grisha and Zeke both look on horrified at what's gone on, at these mutilated bodies, at the manifestation of Eren's monstrous desire to stand for what he believes in, to stop people who try to prevent him and those he cares about, in this case Mikasa, from obtaining their own freedom. That's why he says, rather than letting someone steal my freedom, I'll steal theirs first. It has been ingrained in him from the beginning. These people who restrict the other people, who do these cruel things, they're animals. They're not human beings. They're animals, and they deserve to be mutilated like animals, basically is what he says. He has always thirsted for this freedom, these wings, the bird, past the walls. He's always wanted that, and it has manifested at times in this monstrous, scary behavior, a behavior that people would look on and see and be frightened by. This has always been Eren. He's been this from the start. He has been defined by this, and he remains to be to this day. So he almost sees it as kind of insulting that Zeke thinks that he is like him. I am not like you. I was like this from the start, and I will strive towards my freedom no matter what. Whereas you, on the other hand, you are the result of your experiences. You've come to think these things because of what's happened to you. I have been this way from birth. I've always wanted this. I've been born into this world and I've thought this, and we could not be any more different in that regard. We are not the same. He said to Reiner, we are the same. He says to Zeke, we are not anywhere alike. No one can steal my freedom. And so we get the scene with them overlooking Grisha right before Eren gives Mikasa the scarf, and they're talking, they're looking at it, and Eren goes on with this monologue. He says, I'm not this pathetic little victim you are painting me as. I'm not someone you can relate to. I'm not a convenient little brother to share your emotional scars with. We are not the same. Sorry, brother. We're not the same. And it's just jab after jab. Eren is completely twisted and relentless here. He has no sympathy for Zeke. He doesn't care about hurting his feelings or anything. He doesn't care that Zeke is doing this out of care for Eren. He just sees him as ideological antithesis to what he stands for, as opposition, and as a result, an obstacle. He says to Zeke that he is a man who can't accept himself until he denies his father's wish to restore Eldia. A man who is defined by being haunted by his father, being resentful of his father, defined by these external things. A man who has no identity apart from reacting in the way that his environment has stimulated him to react. Someone who has no base identity of his own. Whereas on the other hand, Eren has always been this person, been this monster who seeked freedom, who would take down anyone who would try to take it from him before they could. He's always been this monster. He's always had this sense of self. And he's saying of Zeke, you do not. You are the opposite of me. You were built up from the outside in. I have always been focused, central. This has been central to my sense of self, to my being. And it's just twisted the way he sticks the knife in here. But from his perspective, you can see where he's coming from. I'm not saying Zeke doesn't have a sense of self, but you can see from Eren's warped perspective why he thinks this way. And it's a very interesting take and contrast between the two, and the way they approach life, and the way they've developed throughout the years. Eren is very much nature. Again, nurture has an impact on him throughout, but the core part of him that he's explaining in this episode has remained unchanged, remained constant, and that is nature. Zeke would have gone much different, would have grown up much different if he was nurtured differently, if he had a different environment. And it's a very interesting thing to think about between the two brothers. Now, in response, and in addition to what was said by Eren about how he and Zeke contrast one another, I think it's worth noting that, in spite of what he says about himself, him being this person from the beginning, him having these motives, this monstrous yearning for freedom since the beginning, I very much think that environment also played a factor. There are key moments throughout, which I just talked about on my discussion stream, which are defined as moments where he truly realized his need for freedom, like when Armin showed him the book, things like that. And there are just key general moments in his character arc that kind of illustrate, that define him, that essentially define him as a person. So, yes, he's had this yearning and this monstrous purity and these monstrous urges from the beginning, but he was also shaped by his experiences in some ways, and he tries to ignore that to a certain extent because Zeke, someone he sees as completely formed from the outside in by these experiences, is someone he doesn't want to be able to relate to at all. I think partly because Zeke's ideals diametrically oppose his and offend him so. Like, I don't think he wants any commonalities with Zeke, and so that's why he emphasizes that we're nothing alike. I'm not a kindred spirit to you. We are nothing alike. We're totally opposite. But he does it so forcefully that it makes you think, does he truly believe all of that? You know, are they nothing alike? Do they not have some commonalities? I think it begs the question, because the way he forcefully conveys this to Zeke, it brings up something in my mind about what he was saying to Armin and Mikasa at the table scene in Season 4, Episode 14, I believe it was. And there's a similar tone in what he says to them. What he says is, I am free. I always have been. Everything I do is pursuing that freedom. It's because I'm free, because I have a will of my own. And he says this to them very forcefully, very bluntly, and he also says, I hate anyone who isn't free. I hate anyone who isn't free. I hate slaves. They're like slaves. They're like cattle. And I hate that. I despise that. And this is very forceful, the way he communicates and articulates this. And I don't know about you guys, but what I think is that when someone is very secure in what they think, when someone is very confident in their ideals and opinions and philosophies, they don't feel the need to flaunt it. They don't feel the need to put it in the forefront and front load it to other people. But Eren is very much front loading this to other people. He's being overbearing with the ways in which he's saying, no, I'm definitely free. There's no doubt in my mind. Would someone who's completely secure say these things in that way? Very much the same with Zeke. We're nothing alike. There's a parallel between we're nothing alike and I am free and I hate everything to do with slavery. Everyone who doesn't have freedom is a slave, etc. I think there's a core similarity there. Would he try to say these things if he was completely confident that he was nothing like Zeke? Absolutely nothing like Zeke, if he was completely free? I don't think so, because as we know, he kissed Astoria's hand and he saw future events and then was traumatized by them because of the horror. But also, we see through Sasha's death that he is completely twisted inside out because he can't change some of these events. He can't alter them as much as he tries. It was a laugh in response to Sasha's death of sadness and futility because he knows in this moment he is not free. At least he wasn't in this situation. So we know he doesn't truly believe everything about him is free. So we know that he's lying a little bit to Armin and Mikasa, whether it be to push them away, to keep them out of danger, or some other reason. It isn't clear at this point in the story. But what is clear is that he is not completely free, because if he was, Sasha wouldn't have died, he wouldn't have had that laugh. The things he had seen would not have seemed as awful to him as they are, and he wouldn't seem so exhausted as he tries to combat these things. I don't think he'd have the same demeanor if he was truly free. So is that true freedom, or is he just playing a part towards whatever ends he saw when he kissed Astoria's hand? It's an open question here that is given by the story, I think. But I think what it does is ask the viewer, the audience, to question, is Eren being completely truthful when he says these things? When he's talking to Armin and Mikasa, would he flaunt his freedom so much if he really believed he was free? When he's talking to Zeke, would he twist the knife in as much as he does, if he truly believed that they had no commonalities at all, that he wasn't, at least to some extent, shaped by certain experiences? Because while it remains to be true that Eren has been defined by this from the beginning to the end, he is also defined by several experiences he's had. In my opinion, that is beyond doubt. And he doesn't really acknowledge that here. Back to the table scene, and with that in mind, he says to Armin and Mikasa, I hate everything who isn't free, or I hate anything who isn't free. They're slaves just like cattle. It begs the question, is he talking to them? Does he hate them because he views them as not free, particularly Mikasa? Or is he talking about himself and his inability to have agency and enact changes that he desires? Is that self-hatred? It's a very interesting topic to dissect, and it's left open-ended here, and I think it's very interesting. Is it a conveyance of self-hate and a conveyance of hate of his inability to change things? And is his championing of this individuality, this liberation, this sense of self that he has, is that a bit of a front, or does he believe it? I think it could be both. I don't think either has to be mutually exclusive. I think he does believe this, but at the same time, I think he's laying it on thick a little bit, and purposefully ignoring certain aspects of his life to show himself to be in such stark contrast to Zeke in this moment. but it's super fascinating. Eren, I think, has had this sense of self from the beginning, but like I said, I do think he's defined by a lot of things that happened to him, by a lot of experiences. His mother dying, being shown the book from Armin of the outside world, being shown the memories from kissing Historia's hand, Hannes' death, Sasha's death. All these sorts of things have shaped him in certain ways, some bigger, some smaller. But this all coalesces in itself to a really interesting idea that I just wanted to share. And so this topic makes me think about one of my favorite lines from the entire series. And that's something that Levi says about Eren very intuitively about his mentality and his monstrous need or monstrous march towards his motivations and his need for freedom. And so what Levi says, this is during the Forest of the Giant Trees portion of the story. He says he's a real monster when speaking of Eren, as Eren's trying to decide whether he should turn into a Titan and fight Annie or trust in his comrades. He says, he's a real monster. I can tell. And it has nothing to do with his Titan power. No matter what power you use to suppress him, no matter what cage you put him in, he will never submit to anyone. And that is as good an encapsulation of this thing, this core facet characteristic that defines Eren that he talks about, that he says, that he's referring to when he says, I am me, than anything else. I love that quote, and it very much applies here. Anyways, Eren talks about all that. We get all that information, contrast between the brothers as Eren, again, twists the knife. And then we get a scene of Eren looking at himself, putting the scarf on Mikasa. And the expression here is one of the ones that I think could have been done a little bit better. I just think the detail's nice. It is expressive. It's pained. You can see he's very sad when he looks on at child him putting the scarf on Mikasa, but I think it could have been a bit softer. I think his brow could have been less furrowed. I think the lines on his face could be a little less bold and defined. I think just lightening his face, the wrinkles, and just making his face clear up a bit as he looks on at this would be good, because the illustration of him as he looks on, adult him, as he looks on child him putting the scarf on Mikasa is absolutely beautiful. Full of longing and sentimentality and complex feelings, it seems like, through this soft facial expression. That comes across in this, but I think because it isn't as soft and sensitive and you can't feel that same sentimental, wistful touch in it, at least in my opinion, it doesn't come across as strongly, which then makes the moment a little less impactful. And speaking of that, yeah, I won't rag on it again, but I don't like how they executed the actual scene, where we just get a sort of wide shot of child Eren looking at Mikasa, Mikasa's back to us, adult Eren looking on, and then Zeke in the background. I think that could have been a bit more personal and intimate. Again, it's reinforced. Zeke says, I can carry out the plan at any time, the euthanization plan, but I want you to learn. I will not abandon you. We'll find the truth, and you will know. We will be on the same side. At this point, I have a feeling that in the back of his mind, Zeke is starting to gradually do this a bit more for himself as well. He's always felt this loneliness. He's felt it again now that he realizes that Eren did not have these same experiences as him. And so I think that in this moment, he wants someone to share his feelings at as deep a level as he thought that he initially could share them with Eren. So I think a part of this is him looking and seeking out and reaching out for this. Not as much as caring for Eren, but I think at this point a seed has sprouted in the back of his mind for another ulterior reason for why he's doing this, a bit for himself, to quell his loneliness. And who can blame him for wanting to do that, right? Very understandable. And we get a beautiful little parallel as they walk by a father playing catch or something with his son. Very reminiscent of child Zeke on his way home after warrior training, or prospective warrior training, seeing the child play with his father and thinking about how that is so in contrast to how he and Grisha interact. Very sad. So another parallel to that, father and son playing ball there. We get a scene with them in the basement. I don't have too much to say about that, but again, Grisha has a bit of a glance at Eren, bit of a quizzical glance. These things are building in his mind. Then we get what is essentially a reanimation, almost shot by shot, as I said in the reaction, of the scene where Eren and Mikasa came home after collecting wood from episode 1. It's, like I said, essentially shot by shot, just with Eren and Zeke added in the background. And the music at this point was swelling so in such a nostalgic, emotional way. I definitely got very much swept up in it. I got emotional at it for all the reasons I described earlier. And also, it's animated in the new Season 4 style. It's not animated, it's not reused, except for I think maybe a couple of scenes. But by and large, it's completely redone, just mirrored basically in the Season 4 art style or aesthetic. And just seeing Carla pinch his cheek, oh man, that really digs deep. And Eren looking on at that, seeing his mother, and again, a reinforcement of Eren's, this core facet of Eren. Why do you want to go out there? Why do you want to become a scout? As Mikasa says to Carla and Grisha, Eren wants to become a scout and they're discussing it. Why do you want this? Why do you want to do this dangerous thing? I want to know what the outside world is like, simple as. If no one's willing to take their place, then the lives of all who have died will be for nothing. That core tenet of Attack on Titan, Erwin said this, Levi said things like this, Eren's saying it here, it's been a constant thing. We carry on the wills of those who perished before us by being their legacy and carrying out what they would have been doing and progressing and continuing this journey towards truth and freedom. That's a core theme of Attack on Titan. Erwin had his whole speech about it, and it's just been there forever. As more and more people get sacrificed, there's more and more pressure on those who survive to carry on their legacies and make sure that their sacrifices are not in vain. So child Eren's speech here is indicative of that. And notably, adult Eren looks pretty surprised at this as he hears him say this, because it strikes a chord. And as well, him speaking of his monstrous need for freedom. Simple, pure. And then we get the scene of him taking out the key, the recontextualization of this scene from the very beginning. Absolutely legendary. When I first read this in the manga, I could not believe my eyes. I could not believe that this whole time Grisha was experiencing this. His face shadowed over. Originally, this was what he was seeing the whole time. Absolutely terrified, knowing that Eren is right there, under pressure from his own son. Anxious, worried. Maybe terrified is a bit too strong a word for this point, but just knowing the context here is so powerful. As child Eren looks on at him in wide-eyed glee and wonder and idealism, smiling at his dad, I'm gonna learn the secrets of the basement, and Grisha says, yeah, you sure can. As at the same time, adult Eren glares him down. So many feelings in this, so many complex feelings here, and just beautiful plotting, just masterful plotting. This has been planned out from the very beginning, and it manifests here. It's beyond words how amazing this plotting is, how amazing it is to have planned these things in advance, and for it to all come together right here. God, is it gratifying. What I will say is that the first half of this episode, I think, was a serviceable adaptation, and because a serviceable adaptation for this material is going to be enthralling, no doubt, nonetheless, it was still very enjoyable, very emotional for me. But the second half is where really the adaptation really dug its teeth into the source material and accentuated and elevated it in a very, very effective way. But yeah, so we continue on. We get this beautiful shot of Grisha looking on with huge abject horror and trepidation at what he thinks he might have to do, his glasses fogged over, in this twilight, this pinkish red backdrop with the forests and crows very ominous around him. Lovely shot, one of my favorite shots in the entire episode. Very ominous. And then he goes to the underground lair to plead and beg to the Rice family, to Frida in particular, you need to kill the Titans attacking the walls. But of course, as he does this, as we see him do this, Frida, there's some hesitation, there's some internal conflict there, but then she is overtaken by the vow to renounce war. For the royal families, the first king of the walls, the vow to renounce war that's been passed down through generations. She has those chains, those metaphorical chains, and she is unable to act, and all she can say here is, we deserve it. Our time has come, we must simply embrace it or just sit there. And Grisha has too much at stake here. That idea, just sitting there, goes against everything he stood for a great portion of his life. I'll get into, there's sort of some caveats there that I'll get into in a second with regards to Grisha, but he cannot stand for this. His family, his loved ones are in danger. His home is in danger, and he can't stand for that. Interestingly enough, while Frida is saying these sorts of things and Grisha is looking on in terror and opposition, Zeke says, looks like me and this girl are on the same page. We would get along, which is slightly humorous. And he's saying, but we know the result of this. Our father, Grisha, slaughters this family and takes the founding titan. And he's talking to Eren, but he's looking on, and he's not looking at Eren. He's talking to Eren and talking to himself at the same time. But when he finally looks to Eren, Eren is furious, fuming, full of rage at how antithetical what Frida is saying. We should just accept the ruin. We should go extinct. Our time has come. We're suffering for the sins of our ancestors, and we deserve this. We cannot hope for any freedom. We don't deserve anything. All that she's saying is so vehemently, diametrically opposed to Eren's ideals, and it enrages him. The look on his face says so much more than words can that I could possibly say. Zeke looks over at him. Eren's eyes are shadowed over at first, and then he kind of flinches, and we see this eyes that would burn the world to the ground. To paraphrase Keith Shadis. God, the fury in those eyes. It is something. It is something. And the music begins swelling here. This Regal Zero SK remix that really encapsulates the intensity of the moment, the grand, regal, epic proportions of this moment that will send cascades throughout history. Very appropriate that this royal family theme, kind of, is playing this remix of it, but a much more sort of emotional, flowing version of it, because there's much more emotional context, much more tragedy and sorrow attached to it here. Very fitting soundtrack use here, and it plays as we see the fury in Eren's eyes here. And we get a great little shot as Grisha is again pleading with him. The people of the Wall are innocent. They don't know their ancestors' sins. Why are you punishing them for the sins of their ancestors? My wife, my child, they're there. These people are all going to die because of you. How can you do that? And he's gesticulating with his arms, and he's pointing back, but there comes to a moment where, very intentionally, I'm sure, he is pointing back, and he points directly to Eren. He's pointing directly to Eren with that fury in Eren's eyes, that fire in Eren's eyes in the background. Very intentional, I'm sure. The people of the Walls, they don't deserve this. Pointing to someone who is soon to be going to influence his actions, someone who embodies the very logic that he is talking about there, to, again, like I've said before, the nth degree. That one is a monster. He will never submit to anyone. Levi wasn't lying. So great shot there. The music swells. Frida is unyielding, overtaken by the vow to renounce war, of course, and says, we should just go extinct here. We accept the world's hatred, there will be no more conflict. That is the logic here. Similar in some ways to what Zeke is saying, as Zeke said, we would get along, but a bit of a different complexion to it, because it's like, accept our sins, blah, blah, blah. Zeke's is just born of sort of just this exhaustion and desire to just end all the pain, end all the suffering. Whereas the distinction with Frida and the vow to renounce war here is that it's deserved. Zeke isn't quite saying that, but the end result that they both desire is the same. And like Eren says in the last episode, he could never stand for something like this. So hearing this just boils him over the top even more. And we get this great shot as Grisha senses Eren, looks to the side, we see a zoom in of Eren's face, and this sort of like boiling ambient sound design that's just building as we see this zoom in on Eren's eyes. It is very effective, and we can feel his fury here once again. It's boiling over. It just keeps boiling. And she says, it's pointless to persuade me. And then we get into Grisha saying the things we already know about the Attack Titans' powers to see across time. He says, we are defined by this moment. The Attack Titan is the antithesis to what you are saying, to combat the King of the Walls, what did he say? Self-righteousness. It's all leading to this moment, and I am here because of this. This is what it's leading to. And he's kind of amping himself up to do what he knows he needs to do. As much as he doesn't want to do it, he's saying, this is what it's led to. This is what's going to have to happen. This is it. This is what we've been fighting for, all for this moment. But it zooms in on his eyes, and you can see the hesitation. You can see the pain. You can see he doesn't want to do this. But just like with many characters, he feels he has to. And he says the future's already decided. I will do this. He grabs his knife, and in response, Frida's about to bite her hand. Grisha using Kruger's method of using a knife, and Frida using Aaron's method of biting her hand. The two parallels between the characters in terms of how the Titan manifests through breaking flesh, I guess. And the tension swells. It's very frantic, frenetic, again, some interlacing of cuts, but then the music completely drowns out to silence, and we hear the clink, and he can't do it. We get a zoom in on his eyes. He sees all the kids here. He cannot do it. He can't kill children. The person he has become is a doctor. This is who he is now. And the person he's become is someone who cares for life, who cannot just, no matter what it may lead to, cannot kill children. He cannot bring himself to do it. It goes against everything he stands for, while the vow that he is trying to combat here goes against everything he stands for, as well, carrying out the act that he thinks he needs to carry out here goes against his very heart's desire as well, to be a doctor, to be someone who provides life and who embraces life and helps people. It is against every fiber of his being to do this, and so he can't bring himself to do it. And so we go back now to what Zeke said when he's pointing in the window at his father. This is our father. This is the true Grisha Jaeger. He was right. The doctor. This is him now. He's a doctor. And when push came to shove, given the opportunity, do I maintain my ideals as a doctor or my ideals as a restorationist? Do I enact this cruelty as a restorationist for the sake of this overall goal? Or do I stick to who I have become over the past few years in this new lease on life, this new Grisha Jaeger? And he decides he cannot do it. He must stick with the doctor, the life giver. And you have so much sympathy for him because it's a rock and a hard place. Making this decision, there is no good decision for him. It's just the less of two evils in his opinion. But he can never justify killing kids like this, killing innocent kids like this, and so he doesn't do it. And there's pure shock everywhere. Zeke is absolutely shocked because in his mind, Grisha does this. He slaughters the family. This cannot be. And then Frida, in response, her eyes are not purpled over anymore. Her eyes are clear, and she's seeing him hesitate, and she's going, what do I do? It characterizes Frida quite well. She embodies the vow, the first ruler of the Wall's vow, the king. But at the same time, there's this hesitation. Her family's egging her on to kill this man, but this man who is showing remorse and who is saying, I'm not going to do it, is right in front of her and saying all that. She cannot bring herself to do it at the same time. She's torn. So I think it characterizes her well. She clearly has some moral principles that she doesn't want to just kill this man who has just said, I can't do it, no matter what potential he has to tear the family apart. Obviously, that ends up being their undoing that she didn't act here. But I think it's very interesting characterization for Frida in this moment. Not a ton, but a nice bit of human nuance when she's not being overtaken by this vow. But it gets down to this moment. Grisha says, I'm a doctor, I can't do this. I save lives. Zeke says, this isn't how it goes down, and the past cannot change. And then we pan up from Grisha to see who but his son overlooking him with immense authority in his eyes, just looking down on him with such scorn. I think scorn is a better word than authority. As he sees his father, in his eyes, this spineless action of not being able to do what it takes, of hesitating. And prior to this point, we had seen Aaron, but we had seen his eyes shadowed over. We had seen him walking past Grisha. We had seen the back of his head. We don't see his eyes, and I think the purpose here is because Aaron is in his mind in this moment going through what is happening. He is seeing his father being hesitant, and I think the gears are turning in his mind, and he's going, Grisha has seen me. Father has seen me. I think this is my role here. I do it. Time has always been a linear line. Things happen as they happen, things happen as we know they happen, and anything that Grisha is influenced by, they're not time traveling, but he is seeing their perspective. And he is being influenced by it. His actions are being influenced by it. And anything he's being influenced by has come to pass already. So Aaron realizes that in this moment and sees he must have impacted his father in some way because he is not about to do it. And so he takes up the mantle. Just as he has been doing all this time, he's accepted the responsibility to become whatever he's become post-time skip, he again, just one more thing to add to his list of burdens on his shoulder, and he accepts it with hesitation. Not only is the OP indicative of that, prior actions and soft facial expressions in the past indicative of that, his whole character indicative of that, the ending as well. But there's a later scene that I'm going to draw attention to after this that shows that, but we'll get to that in a bit. But what I'm saying is there is reluctance here, but I think it's overcome by conviction and rage, because Grisha doesn't do this, and this ideology that he so vehemently opposes, Eren, will take the fore, will succeed, and he cannot stand for that. And so he puts his hand on his shoulder, down to his level, right in his face. And I'm going to read it. It gives me chills just talking about it. Because the subs are slightly different, I'm just going to read it from the manga. Eren says, "What are you doing? Stand, father. Did you forget why you came here? Isn't it to get revenge for your little sister who was eaten by dogs? For your fellow restorationists? For Dinah? And as all this is happening, flashes that I mentioned earlier of Kruger. For Kruger, like he says, you advance on to avenge them. Even if you die, even after you die." Here Eren is repeating what Kruger said to Grisha. There's this theme of repetition across these cycles, across these generations, that continues here. Dad, as we see him pick up the knife, we see a flash to him and Faye holding hands. "You started this story, didn't you?" And the whole time throughout this whole thing, it's silent, dead silent. Love the directorial choice there. Just pure silence and focus on Eren's, Yukikaji's voice, Grisha's painful moans and whines that he has to do this, and a zoom in on Grisha's face, very visceral, very exaggerated, to get across how much pain he is under, how much conflict and turmoil and torment at being forced to do this. And then sound ramps up, and it's not music. Again, it's ambient boiling tension sound. Sorry, I can't describe it that well, but you get what I mean. And then stab, silence. Fade to black. We see Eren kissing Historia's hand, and I think it doesn't get across as clear in the anime, but the implication there is that these events that we're seeing now, these huge revelations, the fact that the whole reason that Grisha did this is because of his son. Eren saw this when he kissed Historia's hand. These are some of the sights he saw that disturbed him so much. And as I'll jump ahead a little bit, he saw more than this. Grisha saw more than this. He saw some of what Eren saw. Not all of it. Eren didn't show him all of it, but he saw more, and Eren saw more. And so the mystery is, what did he see? What is Eren's plan that is so awful? What did he see when what did Grisha see? What did Eren see when he kissed Historia's hand? And then a song starts swelling. Very mournful, very sorrowful, very evocative. It brought me to tears. As we see the remnants of the slaughter, Grisha went through with it, as we know. He got the Founding Titan. And notably, the scene I'm talking about here, is we get a shot of Zeke looking at Eren, and Eren looking on at the tragedy. And whereas before he was full of rage, now his expression has softened, and he just looks once again exhausted and deeply mournful and deeply sad. Sad perhaps at the fact that it has come to this. There is a deep sadness in his eyes here, and that more than anything is indicative of the layers here. There's his conviction of doing what needs to be done, and there is what he really wants to do, and he did not want to have to do this. But he felt forced to, because of the ideologies that have taken root in the vow to renounce war, and how much he feels he must oppose that, how much he feels he must set things in motion. We're getting to the end, I promise. Sorry for rambling. But again, the music keeps swelling, it keeps going on, it's so good. And then I just want to talk a bit more about Grisha here. We have Grisha disheveled, out of his Titan form, just looking completely lost. He's just stumbling around, moaning in pain and misery at what he's just done. He's done something here that goes against his very being. Like he said, I'm a doctor, I cannot do this. Doing this is so against what I stand for, which is why he didn't do it. But he was forced to here. He had no other choice. Eren manipulates him, and he does it. He is completely overpowered by his son, by his monstrous son here. And so I just want to talk a bit more about Grisha. He was left this duty to carry on all of this, right? It was his job to pass on the Titan, to continue this duty for the sake of all those who have passed, and to pass it on to his son. To carry on this duty, and getting the Founding Titan was very much a part of that. He went against it because it went against who he was at this point in time, despite who he was before this. And so what Eren does to him here is genuinely heinous. It is genuinely completely twisted, one of the worst things you can do to anyone, because he sees his father's ideals, he sees why he is hesitating and doesn't want to do it, and yet makes him do it anyway, makes him slaughter innocent kids, and he gets him to do it under the guise of it being to protect his family, for the cause, to carry this forward, and he just reminds him and manipulates him in this way. And so Grisha does it, but it destroys him, inside out. You see him after this, he is barely functioning as a human being, just wandering around, just throwing himself around. Great use of integrated visuals again. We see the blur as he's screaming. Is this what you wanted, Eren? I did it. And so pained, moaning in misery at what he's done. Scared and terrified of his own son. What we have here is a shell of a man. He has gone against everything that he stands for. He has torn himself apart from the inside out to carry out this duty, and all he is now is a hollow shell. The only reason he's even living at this point in time is to carry on this duty, and more importantly, to him, at least to him at this point in time, for his loved ones, for Carla, for Eren, for his family. Notably, Eren did not tell him that Carla died. He didn't tell him that, because protecting Carla is vital to his father doing this in the first place. So by omitting that, by not telling the full truth, it was a means to this end. But yeah, Grisha is a shell. All he hopes for at this point is for his family to be okay, and he has this ingrained duty to carry on this will to pass on the Titan. And this act reduces him to nothing. A completely hollow, tattered shell of a man having killed children, going against who he is. He is nothing. He is reduced to nothing. I cannot stress that enough. And that is communicated so well visually through what he looks like. He is completely disheveled. He is stumbling everywhere. He just sinks to his knees, and just this hopeless yell, these hopeless words. The voice acting just carries it home so effectively. It is so much to take in. Grisha is destroyed, and we know after this that he passes this on to Eren, so we know that he dies forlorn and lost, and burdened by these new sins forced upon him by his own son, hating himself for doing these things. That is what he's become. That is what he is reduced to for the sake of this mission. Again, another sacrifice for someone who had become a man with this new lease on life, with this new productive job, a productive way to interact with the world and help people. All that's left with him is to carry on the Titan. That's it. And that's what Eren does to him. That is the sacrifice. That is what this job is, what this cycle is. Just one more sacrifice to carry on the torch to the next person, to be the next Halos. God, it is so beyond words what happens to Grisha here. Again, your heart goes out to him, despite how flawed he's been in the past. But Eren's life has been leading up to this apex, this moment, and he was never going to let it slip by, even if it meant destroying the man who raised him and loved him and treated him like a genuine son. Eren is, no holds barred, an absolute twisted monster. And whatever his end goal may be at this point, whatever he sees past that horizon, the genuine horizon he sees as portrayed in the ED, nothing will take away from the fact that at this moment, he is a monster. No matter what his end result is, he is a monster, he always has been, and this is the greatest extreme of that monstrosity, what he does to his father here. But we aren't finished. We have one more major scene that made me tear up again, as Zeke sees Grisha just in such pain, and Grisha says, "Zeke, you're here, aren't you?" And he sees him properly. He sees him, and through Eren's eyes, sees where he is to embrace him, and completely embraces him. And he says, "I wasn't a father to you. I mistreated you. I didn't love you. I didn't show you how I felt. I didn't do anything I was supposed to, and you grew up a broken person because of me. I am so sorry, and I love you, son. I love you." This is what Zeke has been waiting for his entire life, as I mentioned earlier. But again, the tone is not, finally, these two characters have this moment to share, and it's beautiful. It is beautiful, in a way, but it's also, the overwhelming tone is very tragic, very sorrowful, and very disturbing because of the context. Nonetheless, they do have this moment, and Zeke does allow himself to dismiss and let go of the hate and resentment he's had towards his father his entire life. And that's beautiful for him, and you love that for him, because that's all he's really wanted, right? That's all he's wanted. As a kid, looking on at fathers playing with sons, vicariously living through that and wishing he could have it, wanting Grisha to love him. He gets it here. But lurking in the background is Eren. And Grisha says, you gotta stop him. What Eren envisions for the future, what comes to pass, is beyond any horrors I can even imagine. It is the worst thing ever. And you have to try and stop him. But at the same time, Grisha sees it, meaning he knows it comes to pass. So can Zeke even stop it? Can anyone stop it? What is gonna happen? Nonetheless, Grisha sees it and he is horrified by it, and he tells Zeke all of this. The other son that he's loved and treated with respect and raised with complete compassion and kindness and connection and affection is going to do this. Imagine how horrifying it must be to know that your son does whatever it is that he saw, whatever it is that he was horrified by, that your son caused you yourself to kill innocent children. I can't even imagine. But yeah, they do have this moment. They do have this embrace, and Zeke does tear up and say, "Father." And it's immensely emotional. Like I said, it isn't a moment of happiness or pure fulfillment or anything, but there is fulfillment here, and there is a breakthrough moment as Zeke accepts this. So there are multiple variables working at play here, but notably, right at the end, who is standing right there? Eren, who is the reason Grisha has even been able to see Zeke from this perspective. Eren, standing behind Grisha this whole time. Zeke sees him, his face covered in shadow, monstrous. They go back into Path's dimension, and we see the last shot of, again, a monstrous look of scorn in Eren's eyes. He has some sort of plan, and he's going to carry it out in the next episode. And one thing I want to draw attention to is, in the manga, this whole time when Zeke and Grisha are embracing, you see Eren in the foreground. You see Eren throughout the whole thing, skulking. So the moment is never fully about Zeke and Grisha, because visually you can see Eren there. What they did in the adaptation was they didn't show Eren until the very end, which I like a lot, because through the music, through audio direction, as it swells and then, lovely little touch, fades and softens as Zeke accepts Grisha's apology and says, "Father, I love you too." That is a moment between them, but the music has this dark undertone to it that says these things are not quite right. Not only is it too little too late, not only is this a moment born of desperation that, while being fulfilling in its own way, the context of which is horrifying, there is something skulking here, something very dark. And that was Eren. That menace in the tone of the song was Eren watching this whole thing the whole time. And I love that he just pops up at the end there. In the manga, he was there the whole time. In this, he catches Zeke by surprise. We don't see him until that moment. And I think it's a great shock to the system. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say about all this. My voice is shot. I don't know how I'm going to do a discussion stream tomorrow morning, but I will try my best. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. I'm sorry for talking my ass off. What a great episode. I've been waiting for this episode for forever, and it did not disappoint. I had an amazing time with it. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on it. I hope you enjoyed the episode more than anything. Again, you can follow my Twitch for episode discussions every Monday morning at 9:30 a.m. for the previous episode. And again, if you would like early access to the next episodes, you can head over to my Patreon for that, just if you're interested. All that said, I think I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me as we continue this journey through the final season. Many thanks for watching.